People don't lie awake at night over what they gained. They replay what they lost. That's not me talking. That's behavioral economics. Studies show that humans feel the pain of loss twice as intensely as the joy of gain. Translation: you don't need to be everyone's favorite. You just need to become the person they're terrified of losing. And there are psychological tricks to make that happen. Let's start with the first one. Scarcity bias. People crave what feels rare. It's why diamonds, which are essentially shiny rocks, are worshipped. It's why sold-out concerts suddenly become the only place you want to be. Scarcity creates value, and abundance kills it. In relationships, friendships, business, this rule never fails. If you're always accessible, always replying instantly, always ready to drop everything, you're signaling abundance. You're like water from a tap, useful but taken for granted. But when you create scarcity, when your time, attention, and energy feel limited, people panic at the thought of losing access. They start protecting their spot in your life like it's VIP. Psychologists call this scarcity bias. The less available something is, the more our brains inflate its importance. And here's the kicker. You don't even need to fake it. You just need a life that's full enough that people realize they're not the center of it. That's when fear kicks in. They're not afraid because you said you're valuable. They're afraid because your lifestyle proves it. Luxury brands do this perfectly. Think about Hermes. They don't flood the market with Birkin bags. They deliberately underproduce, forcing customers to wait, beg, and prove loyalty. The bag itself isn't just leather, it's scarcity wrapped in status. And that's exactly what you must become, the person whose time is harder to get than anyone else's. Because when access to you feels rare, the thought of losing you feels unbearable. Trick 2. Secure indifference. Now let's go darker. Because nothing terrifies insecure people more than indifference. Think about it. The average manipulator, the player, the narcissist, they thrive on reactions. They poke, they disappear, they provoke, all to get an emotional response. Anger, sadness, jealousy, it doesn't matter. If you react, they win, because reaction means relevance. But what happens when you don't react? What happens when their little games land with silence? That's when their strategy collapses. This is called secure indifference. Not coldness, not cruelty, indifference. It's the art of being unshaken, unbothered, calm, while still holding your ground. In psychology, this links to secure detachment, the ability to connect deeply without clinging desperately, and it is terrifying to someone who is used to controlling others through emotional chaos. Here's why it works. When you show indifference, you trigger insecurity in the other person. Suddenly they're unsure if they matter. They wonder, why isn't this working? Why aren't they chasing me? That doubt spreads like wildfire, and humans hate uncertainty more than they hate rejection. Take Machiavelli's philosophy. Rulers must be feared more than loved, because fear guarantees control. Translate that to modern dynamics. Indifference is fear's twin. When you stay unshaken, people fear losing you because they can't read you, they can't predict you, and unpredictability drives obsession. Let's make it real. Picture a breakup. One partner cries, begs for closure, sends long texts. The other partner, silent, calm, already focused on their own life. Which one do you think is remembered longer? The desperate one fades into guilt and annoyance. The indifferent one? They become the ghost that haunts, because nothing makes a person question themselves harder than someone who walked away without a reaction. This is why some of the most magnetic leaders and lovers don't scream, don't plead, don't argue. They simply observe, decide, and move on. And people chase them because silence feels like loss. Secure indifference is power dressed as peace, and it makes people terrified of being on the outside of your calm. Now let's connect the dots. Scarcity bias and secure indifference form the foundation of psychological control. You don't need to be the funniest, most attractive, or most talented person in the room. You just need to master these two levers, make your presence scarce and your emotions untouchable. Do that, and people will cling to you, not because they love you, but because they fear losing the stability, status, or security you represent. And that's the real secret. People don't fear losing someone who's replaceable. They fear losing the person they couldn't control, couldn't predict, couldn't fully understand. That's when your name lives rent-free in their head. We've already seen how scarcity and indifference can flip the balance of power in your favor. Now let's go deeper. Because if you really want people to fear losing you, you need to understand how the human brain gets addicted to unpredictability, unfinished stories, and ego validation. These are the invisible levers that make people chase. And when you master them, you don't just hold someone's attention, you make them terrified of ever losing it. Trick 3. Intermittent reinforcement. This one is brutal, and it's why players, toxic bosses, and casinos all use the same playbook. Back in the 1950s, psychologist B.F. Skinner ran experiments with rats pressing levers for food. Some rats got food every single time, some got food randomly. Guess which group became obsessed? The random ones. They kept pressing the lever even when there was no food left. Why? Because the unpredictability created a stronger dopamine spike than consistency ever could. This is called intermittent reinforcement, and it explains why people get addicted to slot machines, social media notifications, or those partners who text you one day, then vanish the next. The inconsistency keeps the brain guessing, and the guessing fuels obsession. Now here's the trick. When used deliberately, intermittent reinforcement makes people fear losing you because they never feel secure in what they're getting. If you occasionally reward effort, your attention, your affection, your validation, but not predictably, they start working harder. They lean in, they chase, because their brain is chasing the next hit. But here's the warning. This isn't about being manipulative or cruel. It's about not being overly predictable. If you're always available, always responding instantly, always complimenting, you become background noise. But if you show interest in doses, reward action over words, and sometimes step back, you create a psychological loop where people invest more in you because they can't afford to lose access to the reward. Players do this all the time, but when you flip the script and use it on them, they crumble. They're not used to working for someone else's attention. That's why intermittent reinforcement isn't just a trick, it's a power reversal. Trick 4. The Zeigarnik effect. Now let's talk about the obsession with unfinished business, because nothing makes people fear losing you more than feeling they never fully got you. In the 1920s, psychologist Zeigarnik discovered that waiters remembered unpaid orders better than paid ones. Once the bill was settled, the memory faded, but while it was unfinished, the mind kept replaying it. This became known as the Zeigarnik effect, the brain's tendency to obsess over incomplete tasks. Applied to relationships and social dynamics, it's deadly. When you give someone a piece of yourself, an unfinished story, a hint of vulnerability, a sudden pivot mid-conversation, you leave a gap, and that gap gnaws at them. They start replaying the moment, wondering what you meant, what else you would have said, what you're hiding. This is why leaving some things unsaid is more powerful than oversharing. It's why walking away at the peak of interest creates more obsession than dragging things out. It's why a message left on read feels louder than a paragraph reply. You're not giving closure, you're leaving loops open. And here's the psychology. People don't fear losing what they've fully consumed. They fear losing the mystery, the unanswered question, the unfinished story. You become the cliffhanger in their head. And cliffhangers keep people hooked far longer than happy endings ever could. Trick 5. Ego triggering. The next lever is ego. Because if there's one thing humans can't stand, it's feeling irrelevant. Most people operate on autopilot. They expect compliments, attention, validation. When they get it for free, they stop valuing it. But when you flip the script, when you make them work for it, when you reward effort instead of entitlement, you trigger their ego. Suddenly they're chasing your approval, wondering why they're not getting the same reaction as before. Psychologists call this reactance, the pushback people feel when their sense of control slips away. The less validation you hand out freely, the more they crave it, and the fear of losing your approval becomes a powerful motivator. Think about it. Which hits harder, a stranger saying you look good, or the one person you admire withholding a compliment? Exactly. The ego doesn't fear losing strangers. It fears losing the people it secretly wants to impress. Here's the takeaway. Don't be stingy. Be strategic. When someone makes a genuine effort, reward it. When they don't, stay silent. That silence will echo louder than any words, and it will make them fear losing you, because their ego is now tied to your approval. Put these 3 tricks together, intermittent reinforcement, the Zeigarnik effect, and ego triggering, and you create what I call the fear triangle. Intermittent reinforcement keeps them addicted to the next hit. The Zeigarnik effect keeps them replaying unfinished business. Ego triggering keeps them desperate for your approval. Individually, each of these is powerful. Together, they're devastating. They rewire someone's psychology so that the fear of losing you isn't just emotional, it's biochemical. Their brain is now invested in you, whether they admit it or not. And that's why most people never escape the person who mastered these tricks, because you're not just in their heart, you're in their nervous system. So far, we've pulled back the curtain on scarcity, indifference, reinforcement loops, unfinished business, and ego triggers, 5 tricks that already make people uneasy about losing you. But now, let's sharpen the blade, because the next 2 tricks go straight for the nervous system. They exploit the gap between connection and mystery, and when used with precision, they create an obsession so strong that people don't just fear losing you, they fear never fully knowing you. Trick 6. Controlled vulnerability. Most people think power comes from being untouchable. Wrong. Being completely closed off makes you look robotic, inhuman, unrelatable. True power comes from controlled vulnerability. Here's what I mean. You reveal just enough to make someone believe they've unlocked a hidden layer of you. A story from your past, a rare confession, a genuine moment of softness. Then you pivot. You change the subject. You go quiet. You leave it incomplete. Why does this work? Because of 2 things, intimacy and scarcity. When someone thinks they've accessed a part of you that others don't see, they feel special. But when you don't fully open up, they become haunted by what's left unsaid. It creates a bond and a mystery. Psychologists call this the selective disclosure effect. People become more invested when they feel they're earning private information. But when the flow stops, the brain experiences tension. The person starts obsessing, trying to figure out the missing pieces. Think of it like reading a diary with half the pages ripped out. The parts you read are emotional, raw, real. But because it's unfinished, your brain won't let it go. You replay it. You try to imagine the missing chapters. That's what controlled vulnerability does. It makes people fear losing you, not because of what you gave them, but because of what they almost had. Here's the danger zone. If you overshare everything, you kill the mystery. If you undershare everything, you kill the bond. The balance is the trick. Enough depth to create emotional investment, but not enough to give away your entire blueprint. The unknown is what keeps people awake at night. Trick 7. Strategic silence. If controlled vulnerability creates obsession, strategic silence deepens it. Silence isn't absence. It's presence without words, and nothing makes people fear losing you like silence at the right moment. Players, manipulators, even narcissists, what do they all rely on? Reaction. They push buttons, disappear, provoke jealousy, just to get you to explode or beg. The moment you react, they know they still control the frame. But when you stop reacting, when their chaos lands in silence, that's when the panic sets in. Because silence isn't neutral, silence is power. Machiavelli wrote that appearances govern the crowd more than truth. In modern terms, silence is the ultimate appearance. People fill it with their own fears, their own insecurities, their own doubts. They project meaning into your quiet. Here's the science. Studies on communication show that humans find ambiguity stressful. We crave clarity. When there's none, the brain scrambles to fill the gaps. This is called cognitive closure bias. And when you withhold that closure, you become the unsolvable riddle. People fear losing you because they can't handle the mental itch of not knowing where they stand. Examples are everywhere. The ex who ignores a dramatic text thread while calmly living their life. The leader who pauses in silence after a bold statement, letting the room drown in uncertainty. The partner who doesn't explain why they pulled back. In each case, silence speaks louder than any words could. Strategic silence isn't ghosting, it's timing. It's pulling back right after a moment of intimacy. It's not over-explaining when someone demands answers. It's letting your absence echo in their head while you remain calm, grounded, and present in your own life. Here's the real punch. Silence flips the fear. Most people fear conflict, but silence makes them fear irrelevance. And irrelevance is worse than rejection. Rejection is clear. Irrelevance is haunting. Now imagine combining controlled vulnerability with strategic silence. You share a glimpse of your inner world, something powerful, real, maybe even emotional. Then you go quiet. No closure, no follow-up, no explanation. The other person is left holding the weight of your words, with nowhere to put it. Their mind races, their ego panics, their dopamine system spikes. They can't afford to lose you now because losing you would mean losing access to the answers, the intimacy, the mystery they think they almost solved. This is how obsession is built, not through drama, not through chaos, but through subtle psychology. A drop of depth, followed by silence that lingers longer than words ever could. Scarcity makes people fear losing your time. Indifference makes them fear losing your validation. Reinforcement loops make them fear losing your attention. But vulnerability and silence, they make people fear losing your essence. And that's the deepest fear of all, because people can find another funny friend, another attractive partner, another loyal supporter, but they can't easily replace the mystery of someone who showed them a glimpse of truth, then vanished before they understood it. That fear doesn't fade, it replays, it haunts, and it makes people hold tighter, chase harder, and cling longer, because the alternative is never getting the full picture. We've already uncovered 7 psychological tricks that make people uneasy about losing you. Scarcity, indifference, reinforcement loops, unfinished business, ego triggers, controlled vulnerability, and silence, each one designed to make you unforgettable. But now we move into the territory of active defense, boundaries, contrast, and frame control. Because if the first 7 tricks make people chase you, these next 3 make them protect you, guard you, and panic at the idea of losing their place in your life. Trick 8. The power of boundaries. Boundaries aren't walls, they're lines that define value, and nothing terrifies people more than realizing your value isn't unlimited. Most people think saying yes makes them loved. Wrong. It makes them used. When you never say no, when you bend your schedule, when you ignore your own needs just to please others, you don't make them fear losing you. You make them assume they already own you. The psychology is simple. Boundaries signal self-respect, and self-respect is magnetic. In fact, studies on attraction repeatedly show that people rate partners with firm boundaries as more desirable, more trustworthy, and more worth chasing. Why? Because boundaries communicate scarcity. You're not accessible 24/7. You're not on sale. You're not handing out discounts. Think of it like a luxury hotel. They don't allow just anyone to wander in, use the pool, and raid the minibar. Access is restricted because access is valuable. That restriction creates status, and status creates fear of loss. Here's the twist. Boundaries don't push people away. They pull the right ones closer. The people who fear losing you aren't the ones who want to use you. They're the ones who realize access is earned. Boundaries make your presence a privilege, not a guarantee. Trick 9. Emotional contrast. Now let's weaponize contrast, because nothing makes people fear losing you like the whiplash between warmth and coldness. Here's the secret. The human brain doesn't measure emotions in absolutes. It measures them in contrasts. A sunny day feels warmer after weeks of rain. Silence feels heavier after intimacy, and attention feels priceless after a sudden withdrawal. This is why emotional contrast is so powerful. If you're warm, attentive, and engaging, but then suddenly, calmly, you become distant or reserved, the contrast shocks the nervous system. It makes people think, what just changed? Did I do something wrong? Am I losing them? That uncertainty amplifies their attachment. Psychologists call this emotional intensity theory. The value of an experience spikes when contrasted with its opposite. In relationships, this means your moments of warmth become unforgettable only when paired with moments of distance. Think of a stage performance. A whisper is only powerful because it follows silence. A shout only works because it breaks calm. If you're always warm, people take it for granted. If you're always cold, people tune out. But if you move between the two, calmly, strategically, you create a rhythm that keeps people on edge. And here's the kicker. People don't fear losing constant warmth. They fear losing the unpredictable balance of warmth and distance that only you provide. That emotional roller coaster cements their attachment. Trick 10. Reverse frame control. Let's go darker, because this trick is straight out of Machiavelli's playbook. Every interaction has a frame, an invisible set of rules that define who's leading and who's following. In relationships, players often control the frame by making themselves the prize. They act like their attention is scarce, their validation rare, their presence a gift, and most people fall into the trap of playing along, trying to impress, trying to qualify, trying to win. But when you reverse the frame, the fear shifts. Suddenly they're the ones trying to impress you. They're the ones adjusting to your pace. They're the ones terrified of losing access. How do you do it? Subtly. You don't announce it. You demonstrate it. Don't ask where things are going. Act like you already know your direction. Don't beg for reassurance. Show that your life is already full. Don't mirror their inconsistency. Set your own tempo, and let them adjust or fall behind. Psychologists call this frame control. Whoever sets the frame dictates the meaning of the interaction, and when you set it, you become the one they chase. Case study, negotiations. The party that frames the deal as take it or leave it usually wins. Why? Because the other side fears losing the opportunity. The same applies in human dynamics. When you stop auditioning and start evaluating, you flip the fear. You're no longer worried about losing them, they're worried about losing you. And that fear is far stronger than affection. Put these three tricks together, boundaries, emotional contrast, and reverse frame control, and you create what I call the protector's instinct. People stop seeing you as optional. They start seeing you as irreplaceable. Your boundaries remind them that access isn't guaranteed. Your contrast keeps their emotions heightened. Your frame control makes them invest more than they planned. And when people invest, they protect. They fear losing you not just emotionally, but strategically, because losing you means losing the status, the validation, and the rare access they worked so hard to earn. We are now at the stage where the game turns surgical. You've learned how scarcity, indifference, unfinished business, ego triggers, vulnerability, silence, boundaries, contrast, and frame control all create the psychology of fear. That's 10 tricks already. But the next two, mystery and loss aversion, are the ones that hit deepest, because they target the most primal fear of all, the fear of the unknown and the fear of losing what feels already theirs. Trick 11. Mystery over confusion. There's a big difference between mystery and confusion. Confusion is chaos. Mystery is control. One makes people frustrated, the other makes people obsessed. Confusion looks like mixed signals, contradictions, hot and cold behavior. And while it might capture attention temporarily, it eventually exhausts people. They leave because no one wants to live in constant fog. That's why players who rely on confusion eventually get exposed. Mystery, on the other hand, is addictive. It's clarity in lifestyle, but vagueness in emotion. People see that you're consistent in your values, your boundaries, your goals. They know you're disciplined, busy, intentional. But what they don't know is what you really feel about them. They're never fully sure if they've won you. Psychologists call this the ambiguity effect. People are more attracted to outcomes that are uncertain, because uncertainty creates tension, and tension keeps people hooked. Here's how to use it. Be clear about your time. Be clear about your boundaries. Be clear about your standards, but stay vague about your emotional investment. Don't overshare what you feel. Don't confirm the level of attachment they're hoping for. Let them see glimpses, then change the subject. Let them wonder what you're really thinking. Why does this create fear? Because mystery makes people believe there's more to uncover, and the possibility of losing access to that more is terrifying. It's not what you've given them that haunts them. It's the belief that there's still something left, and they might never get it. Look at history's most magnetic figures. Cleopatra, Casanova, even Machiavelli himself. They never gave people full clarity. They gave performance, intrigue, charisma, but always left the question, what's underneath? That question is what makes people lose sleep at night. Not clarity, not comfort, mystery. Trick 12. Loss aversion. Now we get ruthless, because nothing controls human behavior more than the fear of loss. In behavioral economics, this is called loss aversion. Nobel Prize-winning research shows that people feel the pain of losing something twice as strongly as the joy of gaining it. That means someone would rather avoid losing $100 than win $200. Loss cuts deeper than gain ever satisfies. Applied to relationships, this principle is devastating. People may enjoy your presence, but what truly terrifies them is the thought of losing it. And here's the trick. You make them feel the risk of loss before it even happens. How? By pulling back just when they think they've secured you. By staying consistent in your lifestyle, so they know you'll survive without them. By rewarding effort, but never overcommitting. By reminding them subtly that your world doesn't revolve around theirs. This creates a constant undercurrent of fear. What if I lose them? What if they walk away? What if someone else gets what I can't hold on to? That fear makes people cling tighter, invest more, and value you far beyond logic. Real-world example. Think about startups pitching investors. The ones who beg rarely get funded. The ones who say, we only have one more slot left, trigger loss aversion. Suddenly investors are scrambling to secure the deal, not because of what they'll gain, but because of what they might miss out on. You must become that startup, not desperate, not begging, not over-available, but subtly reminding people that access to you is never permanent, that at any moment You could pivot, move, leave. That's when the fear of loss transforms into loyalty. And here's the beauty. Loss aversion isn't about manipulation. It's about truth. Because you can walk away, you will survive without them. You don't need anyone to complete you. When that truth sinks in, people realize they're always at risk of losing you, and that realization keeps them in check. Mystery makes people crave clarity they'll never fully get. Loss aversion makes them cling to the access they're terrified of losing. Together, these two tricks form a psychological shadow that follows you everywhere. People don't just enjoy you, they guard you. They don't just like you, they fear losing the chance to fully know you, or worse, losing the access they already have. And that's the kind of fear that doesn't fade, because mystery lingers in the mind, and loss aversion lingers in the body. One creates obsession, the other creates panic. We've covered 12 psychological tricks, each one sharp enough to shift the balance of power in your favor. But now we arrive at the 13th, the final move, the one that separates amateurs from strategists. Because while scarcity, mystery, boundaries, and silence make people chase, this trick makes them haunted. It turns fear of loss into obsession. It's simple, it's brutal, and it works every time. Trick 13. Walking away first. The most devastating psychological trick is also the simplest. You leave first, not after begging, not after a fight, not after a dramatic monologue. You leave silently, strategically, and on your own terms. Why does this work? Because it weaponizes two things we've already discussed, loss aversion and the Zeigarnik effect. When you walk away first, you create unfinished business. The other person is left replaying everything, searching for the moment they lost control. Their brain enters the Zeigarnik loop, an endless replay of an unresolved story. And because there's no closure, no explanation, no scene to wrap things up, the obsession festers. At the same time, walking away triggers loss aversion at maximum volume. They thought they had you, they thought they were winning, and then suddenly, it's gone. Research shows the human brain processes loss like physical pain. When you exit early, they don't just miss you, they feel you like an ache that doesn't go away. Here's the brutal truth. People rarely fear losing what they believe they control. But when you leave first, you show them they never had control to begin with, and that's the wound that doesn't heal. Most people ruin this move by needing the last word. They want to send a long text, a dramatic goodbye, a speech that proves they were right. But that's not power, that's weakness. Machiavelli wrote that fear lasts longer than love, and nothing lasts longer than the silence of someone who could have spoken but didn't. Silence denies the other person resolution. Silence denies them relevance. Silence turns them into the one chasing a ghost. When you walk away without explanation, you do something rare. You deny the other person closure while keeping your dignity. That's the kind of exit people replay for years. They don't remember the ones who begged. They remember the one who vanished calmly, confidently, permanently. In therapy circles, there's a term called the manipulator collapse. It happens when someone who relies on control tactics suddenly meets a person who doesn't react, doesn't fight, doesn't play. The manipulator's world crumbles because their strategies stop working. Walking away first triggers this collapse. The manipulator isn't devastated because they loved you. They're devastated because their identity depended on controlling you. When you exit early, you force them to face the fear they've buried under tactics, the fear of irrelevance. And that fear is far stronger than any temporary affection. Here's the secret weapon. You don't just leave, you upgrade. You live better, louder, stronger, without looking back. You don't post revenge pictures. You don't craft cryptic captions. You simply exist in a way that makes their memory of you heavier every day. Why does this work? Because you turn yourself into a contrast. Their chaos versus your calm. Their noise versus your silence. Their manipulations versus your growth. The more they replay what they lost, the more they realize they can't get it back. This is why walking away first is the ultimate trick. It's not about cruelty. It's about discipline. It's about valuing yourself so deeply that you don't need revenge, explanation, or attention. Your absence becomes the punishment, and the fear of ever losing you again becomes the obsession that keeps them hooked long after you're gone. So let's step back. 13 psychological tricks. Scarcity bias. Secure indifference. Intermittent reinforcement. The Zeigarnik effect. Ego triggering. Controlled vulnerability. Strategic silence. Boundaries. Emotional contrast. Frame control. Mystery. Loss aversion. And finally, walking away first. Each one different, but all pointing to the same truth. People don't fear losing love. They fear losing power. They fear losing relevance. They fear losing what they can't replace. And when you embody these principles, you stop being an option. You become a presence so rare, so disciplined, so mysterious, that the thought of losing you is more terrifying than the joy of keeping you. That's when people don't just like you, they guard you. They don't just want you, they protect their access to you like it's survival. Machiavelli would have smiled at this, because his philosophy was simple. Men are driven by two things, fear and gain. If you control both, you win. And in modern psychology, the same applies. People may admire those they gain from, but they fear losing those they can't control. This video isn't about cruelty. It's not about being toxic. It's about reclaiming the leverage most people throw away, because the sad truth is, many people live begging for love, while the real power lies in mastering loss. When you learn these 13 tricks, you stop asking, will they love me? And you start asking, do they fear losing me? And that one question changes everything. Because love fades, infatuation fades, but fear of loss, that echoes.